Welcome to Legal Connect, where each week we sit down with top lawyers to demystify the process of hiring and working with legal counsel in today's world. From navigating the legal system to understanding your rights, our expert guests provide valuable insights and tips for anyone facing a legal challenge. So tune in, take notes, and join us as we explore the ins and outs of the legal profession. A quick disclaimer, anything discussed in the podcast is general tips and advice, not formal legal advice. Always consult a lawyer. Hey, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Legal Connect podcast. Today, I am joined by Danielle Murphy, also known as Dan, from MD Law Group, which is a criminal lawyer, and I'm excited to chat with him about all things criminal law today. So welcome to the show, Dan, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Yeah, so why don't we just kind of start by giving the listeners a little bit of background knowing you, how you ended up getting into law. I know you've had quite a long journey, and some of your experience along the way, both working on the prosecution and defense side, because I'm sure that there was quite a jump and quite interesting things you've seen on both sides from that experience.
Absolutely. So to begin with, law school wasn't something that I had thought I was going to do. I got a master's degree and then quickly realized there was nothing to do with that degree, and started looking for other opportunities. The criminal justice system always kind of intrigued me. So I applied and ended up going to law school in Toronto, and then in Ireland for a year, all with a focus on criminal law as I went through. And then once I finally got through law school, which is always an ordeal, I started to experience work, right? So I went to first Newfoundland, the Crown Attorney's Office in Newfoundland, doing a lot of traffic ticket prosecutions, high stakes stuff, and I quite enjoyed my time there. Newfoundland had a different pace of life than we do in Alberta and in Ontario, definitely. And then I moved to Ontario, where I'm from, and was a federal prosecutor, so a drug prosecutor out there for a short time. And finally, Alberta, where I was a prosecutor in Red Deer, which was my introduction to Alberta. And Red Deer is a very busy place for a prosecutor. It's wild.
You wouldn't have thought, compared to even like bigger areas like Toronto, that Red Deer, Alberta, of all places, would have so much to work with.
It's very surprising. So when I arrived in Red Deer, I saw it was a small place. I thought it would be relatively slow, and I was quickly taught that was not the case. And I've never seen that many 30-page criminal records in my life. So, individuals really were at work in the Red Deer in terms of criminal behavior. So, I did that for 9 months, and I've always done criminal defense in between the times when I wasn't a prosecutor. And the first experience I had with that was in Toronto doing criminal defense work. And it's very different from being a prosecutor. A prosecutor, you don't live with these individuals. These individuals tend to live in your head as your clients. And the day ends at 8:30 to 4:30 generally as a prosecutor, whereas a criminal defense lawyer, you stop working when you say, otherwise you never stop working. So that was a definite change. And then obviously defense, you'd get vested in your clients. So when they suffer a loss or they're convicted, it can be quite emotional. Whereas when I was a prosecutor, there was very little emotion associated with an accused person. And the victims or the complainants, we did have some contact, but not a lot of contact. So it was in terms of an emotional roller coaster, it wasn't that. Whereas as a defense lawyer, it certainly is, right? Because you don't want to see these people convicted, especially if you're convinced they're innocent. And unfortunately, that's not always the way. So.
Right. And I'm curious, just backing up a little bit, what drew you to criminal law of all the practice areas? Was it right from law school that you kind of knew, or was it just from having that first career experience, or where did that kind of attraction to that area come from?
Well, yeah, so criminal law, unfortunately, comes a bit from my family in terms of my brother, who was always involved with the criminal justice system. And as some people in Toronto I grew up with and I ended up representing later on in life, were also involved in the criminal justice system. So I spent quite a bit of time watching. I went to courtrooms, courthouses for various cases. And it was attractive to me because I recognized people like my brother who would not hire a lawyer and ended up on his own, were at such a disadvantage. And, I wanted to try to ameliorate that disadvantage by doing some defense work. Now, I was of the view that if I did some Crown work first and got that training, that would be the best training possible to step into the defense world, because I'm basically turning it on its head and I'm going to argue the opposite, right? So that's how that worked out. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely an advantage there of understanding both sides and even understanding how you prepare a defense or a strategy for each side, right? So
exactly. It helps to have. I mean, you can never know what the other side is thinking. You can make some educated guesses, but yeah, if you understand this is what makes them tick, this is how they're supposed to operate, it makes my life much easier as a defense lawyer to kind of account for behaviors. But again, it's unpredictable. It's people, and you never know. You could have a Crown who doesn't follow any of the protocols you think they should, and they'll let you know they don't care about what you think about them following protocols. So you learn that quickly as well. I mean, Toronto, I dealt with hundreds of prosecutors, and Alberta, I deal with far less, but yeah, different personalities for sure. So yeah, I can imagine we would definitely meet all sorts of personalities on that side. Oh, yeah. And I'm curious now, with how did you end up going from this experience to founding MD Law Group, and where is the business at kind of currently? Is it you, or do you have partners working with you, or how has that journey been, kind of starting your own business? Yeah, so that was the exciting part of this whole journey. So it's something I ran my own shop in Toronto, but I was just by myself. So MD Criminal Defence was developed by myself and a partner. The partner is no longer with the office. Now we have 8 lawyers, we formed the MD Law Group. So we have family law, real estate, immigration, criminal. So it expanded quite dramatically and quite quickly. I still stick to criminal only because God knows if they put me in a real estate deal or something like that, how that would go. So we're still in a growth period. We're still hiring. We're still bringing on people. One thing I learned about this business is how important marketing, advertising it becomes. Like Latique is an example, in terms of promotion. But so I was always actively looking for promotions and how to build, and was able to in Alberta do within about 2.5 years what I couldn't do in Toronto in like 5 to 7 years, right? So it is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and how has that been for you? Are you kind of in this business manager role now, being one of the founders, or do you have an external manager that kind of helps you just with the daily tasks and overseeing all the other lawyers at the firm?
Unfortunately, I'm it. So they my door is always open. I deal with each lawyer as their issues emerge. It definitely puts me in more of a management role than I was. So my file load has dramatically decreased. And people say, is that worse or better or worse? It's neutral because management is difficult, and dealing with people's issues is difficult. I enjoy watching them all grow, and I enjoy watching them go off to court and do well. But I miss being in the courtroom as often as I used to be, for sure. So. Yeah, but it's exciting on the other hand that you have been able to now expand your offering past just criminal law. Like you said, you have real estate and family and all these other things you couldn't necessarily taken on by yourself in the past. No, so exactly. I mean, I was limited to what I could do. I was limited to how much I could earn. I was limited in every capacity until I started bringing some new people, new bodies in. And as I say, it's a very young law office. The lawyers, I've got 12 years, but they're at 2 years, 5 years at the most, I think. So very young and enthusiastic group. I just have to keep up, right? So eat my Wheaties, exercise, do stuff like that, just so I can hold court with these youngsters, right? So yeah.
Well, I think that is actually one thing that's not talked about as often as it should be, is just lawyers, well-being and just having a job that requires. When at times, you do have to take care of yourself if you're going to be able to take care of your clients.
Oh yeah, it's a brutal profession. It can be, and extremely stressful, right? And so coming up with mechanisms like going to the gym, eating healthy, cutting alcohol, all that kind of thing is. When I was younger, I couldn't care less, nor did I think it was important. Now, I definitely am keen on keeping all these things in check. Because as I say, my door's open and I spend about 8 hours a day chatting with different lawyers as they come in with their various problems and issues. So,
yeah. It must be rewarding, but at the same time, yes, also a huge new stressor to add to your career. Right?
Yeah, they don't train us this way. Yeah, they don't train us in law school. They don't train us to do this, right? So that's the issue. So.
Yeah. And then when it comes to, shifting back to your own work for a second, I know you said that your caseload has obviously reduced since you have kind of taken on this management role. But when it comes to criminal cases, are there certain types that you deal with commonly that people kind of seek you out for, certain areas? Or is it just kind of a little bit of everything? Or how does that work?
So it definitely is a bit of everything. We do everything from shoplifting to murder in the office. Unfortunately, there seems to be a very large demand for sexual assault cases, which are cases often with little evidence and just he said, she said. So that often becomes something where someone wants to hire you and they can't plead guilty because of the consequences are so severe. And then domestic violence, unfortunately, plagues the justice system, and we deal with a lot of those cases. Just by their sheer volume, you're going to run into them. And then Alberta's changed because drinking and driving used to be one of your premier criminal cases, and now drinking and driving is basically an administrative penalty and not something you get in criminal trouble for. So that changed kind of the landscape of how things looked.
You were explaining about how the drinking and driving has changed to be an administrative offense, and I just asked.
Well, it was a couple of years ago now. BC started. And then it moves to Alberta. What it essentially does is basically the criminal justice system was getting kind of inundated with drinking and driving cases. It's the most common offense. Doctors down to anyone else has been charged with that. So in BC, they made it administrative, and we were following suit. And I expect the whole country will eventually do this because the problem was that, defense lawyers are getting paid really well. It's great. But, you're having prosecution, judges, police, and it gets really heavy. It gets really expensive. It's quite a burden on the resources, right? So, I mean, between that and petty drug crime, which is another issue, but that hasn't been fixed. Those are common cases that we run into. So.
Yeah. I live in.
Oh yeah.
They just recently. Once we criminalized a lot of the small drug or petty drug possession. And
they're looking at drugs as a public health issue as opposed to a criminal justice issue, which I agree with 100%. So that's just the way it is. So.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. And then I guess one question I'd love to know too, because as somebody that's maybe hiring a criminal defense lawyer for the first time, obviously you're in a very vulnerable position, most likely. How would someone go about deciding, who to work with? What should they kind of be on the look for as somebody that, has worked in this industry a long time and has obviously seen all different types of criminal lawyers? How should someone go about choosing the right criminal lawyer to represent?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of people, if it's their first time in trouble, they head to the internet, right? The websites mean nothing. The Google reviews mean everything. So how they're performing in reviews, and the comments made by their former clients will give you a lot of insight into that lawyer. Not necessarily, you don't necessarily want to decide on that basis, but it might weed out some of the lawyers right off the bat. The next thing I would do is always have a phone conversation with the lawyer. The consultation should be fulsome, right? There's a lot of times lawyers are quick to get you off the phone to get your retainer and get moving. But if you have questions, they should answer. You're the client. We work for the client, and we should take the time and the patience to answer as many questions as need to be answered. Because if you look at it, it's really an inexpensive service, and you should be provided first class service. So you've got to have that one ability to converse with that individual, and then you have to trust that individual too, because the criminal justice system, it takes a long time to get to, say, a trial. You can be looking at 8 to 12 months or more if it's a very serious offense. So you have to be comfortable talking with them. You have to be comfortable sharing information with them. Obviously, it's always privileged between a lawyer and the client, but it's necessary that you can ask the questions, not feel stupid about it. And when you're given answers, not belittled, it's not condescending. It's something where you're like, okay, I get it, or I don't get it. Can I ask another question? The lawyer should not be rushing you to answer those questions. The lawyer should be sitting with you, listening attentively, because if they're going to form a proper defense, a lot of it is listening to the client, because they're going to know the story of that evening or that day better than anyone will ever know that story. So if you don't have an open dialogue between yourself and the client, you're not going to get very far, from my perspective. Other people don't like to speak with the clients; they just like to do the job. But if I was going to hire someone, that would be unacceptable to me, right? As someone looking for someone and paying them, big sums of money to represent me and defend me. And I also want, and I think too, is including you in the strategy. So when you show up for trial, you know what's going to happen to some degree. You can never know exactly what's going to happen, but they do explain to you, this is where I'm going. These are the holes we're going to be trying to poke in the Crown's case, so that when you're sitting there, you're informed. Because a lot of times it's, lawyer knows best. Clients sit there quietly, and that's really unfortunate, because if you're found guilty, you have no idea why you were found guilty. So in terms of an appeal or whatever you're going to do next, that's missing in terms of your knowledge, and it's rarely available. The lawyer had to devise a strategy. All they had to do was call you and fill you in. So I would think that's critically important, and that takes you kind of to the end of the case. And if they know you and they've taken your information, if you are convicted, they're going to do a better sentencing job too, because they have to know your personal circumstances and they have to lay those out for the court, right, to ask for leniency, and that has to be done, and the only way that can be done is through open communication, like I'm suggesting, and keep kind of hammering on. And then in terms of if you're not convicted and you're acquitted, you can walk away fine. And then also, again, with a conviction, you can appeal. And if you appeal, the lawyer should help you in the appeal. But if you're tuned into what that lawyer said he or she was going to do in terms of strategy, and they did none of it, then you may have an issue with the lawyer that you want to bring up to your appeal lawyer. But again, being an informed client, and you got to be proactive as a client too. You push that lawyer to give you that information, but make sure they give it to you. So that's it. I just think it just needs to be open communication and trust between client and lawyer. So
yeah, well, that pretty much answers most of my next question too, because I was going to ask you how you go about preparing a defense strategy, and obviously very high level, not a specific kind of case. But it sounds like a lot of those things you're talking about, making sure the client is informed, like making sure the client knows the strategy. But is there anything else that you would add when you're kind of going through and preparing your defense? Just like how
I think the bottom line is you have to be unbelievably informed on the Crown's case. So they give you disclosure, which is supposed to be all the case is about. This is the Crown's case. This is what the police prepared. You need to read that very carefully, and you need to ask follow-up questions if you need additional disclosure. The biggest disservice you can do to your client is leaving disclosure to the last moment, and then realizing, well, I didn't get A, B, C. This would have been helpful for defense. This application should have been brought. The only way you tune into those things is if you start right away. So you'll know the application you need to bring because you read it in the first week and you're thinking, okay, well, I need to do X. And in terms of disclosure, you're missing a number of pieces of disclosure. The only reason you're going to know that, again, is you're taking the time to review. So it's a careful analysis. And then I sit down with the client after I do that analysis and do another analysis with them where I talk about the case. I go through the disclosure with them and they give me their inputs because they may have some valuable inputs that I've missed. Again, and that's why I think the relationship is symbiotic. It has to have both parties participating, because again, that client might provide me something that I had no clue about, like the relationship between two individuals. I wouldn't know about that because it's not mentioned, nor did the police know about that. But of course they know, oh yeah, they're a couple, or that's this person's cousin, and those are the reasons why I think the communication piece is important. And then preparing, of course, you're going through disclosure constantly. When you get to trial, you should have all your disclosure in place. And then you're breaking each witness down, what you hope to achieve from each witness. Like people think, we just ask questions, but sometimes it's very strategic, and you're funneling them into a theory of your case. And that's what we're doing, right? We're trying to get, I may have 5 questions for a witness that everyone thinks is very critical, because all I need to do is have them admit those 5 things. And then I stop. But if my client has no idea that I'm doing that, they may think, what the hell is going on? Because why did he ask 5 questions of the expert? He should be asking questions all day of the expert. However, if I explain it to my client, they'll know 5 questions is all we needed, right? And that's again important. So.
Yeah, I can't imagine having a lawyer that wouldn't tell you what's going on. Because you need to really be informed of the strategy to be able to, have this strong.
Yeah, we hear it too much. Where it's I didn't really know what they were doing. I just kind of got dragged along for the ride. Now you can believe half of it, but it's still some of it is accurate. And I know with the free consultations, some people are very rushed in those consultations. They're giving 5 minutes because they're not getting paid, which I understand. Everyone wants to be paid for their work, but free consultations are a part of the marketing mechanism that gets criminal lawyers their work. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's because your cases are so long as well. Like you said, it's taking, maybe a half an hour or whatever to speak with someone, and that's going to be a client you're going to have for months, maybe even.
Exactly. You're going to have like a view of the long game rather than just a short-term view of the world, right? Oh, I'm wasting this time on the phone. You're not wasting that time on the phone. That's an opportunity, right? And you have to view each call as an opportunity, right? To build up your client base and to build your firm. I mean, that's how I've gone from myself to 8 lawyers, because I took those calls. I didn't like taking all those calls, but I took them, and that's it. So, yeah.
yeah, exactly. One of the things I'm curious about too, actually, well, this is interesting for me personally. I have a minor in criminology from my degree, so I learned like the sociological side, not as much as the lawyer side. But I'm curious, are there kind of like repeat issues that you see or challenges that you see your clients face in the Canadian justice system? I know we talk a lot about, like repeat offenders being a big thing. Like, do you see a lot of that, or are there like just kind of barriers or challenges that you see your clients face?
Yeah, I think one. I mean, we talked about it earlier with BC being proactive with public health. People who have addictions or mental health issues tend to end up in the criminal justice system, and then repeatedly in the criminal justice system, because they're treated as not their mental health isn't treated, nor are their addictions treated. So one expects they'll go to jail for a short stint of time because they haven't done anything that serious. They'll go out, they'll use drugs again, and then they'll be back, and that's a problem. So that's a huge issue. The barrier becomes the resources are lacking. So Edmonton is significantly lacking in terms of helping people with addiction issues, and again. That's tax dollars to pay for it, and a lot of people are not necessarily interested in paying for it. The other issue people face is an access to justice issue, is money. Legal aid has a very, very low amount of money you can earn per year. If you earn above that, or if you have assets, you're not going to get legal aid. And you're also probably not able to afford a lawyer. And so you see self-represented people more often in the criminal justice system, which I wouldn't represent myself. I'm a lawyer. I do criminal work all the time, and I wouldn't represent myself because it's not a good idea. However, what on earth are these individuals to do, right? And and some members of my firm volunteer. There's some pro bono work, but there would have to be, lawyers would have to give up their day job to do all the pro bono work that needs to be done in the community, right? And again, those are often the same people afflicted with drug issues and addiction, mental health issues. So it goes hand in hand, right? And as I say, until they come with a fix, until they treat this stuff like public health issues instead of policing issues, I don't see a correction in it. I see it continuing on at the rate it's going.
Yeah. It's funny. I think it's almost again like a marketing or a branding problem of how we, think about these solutions. Because how much does it cost to have somebody incarcerated for a year, right? Versus how much does it cost to fund an addiction program?
Exactly. And I think I did used to say that when I was in law school. It was like putting someone in a 5-star hotel, putting them in jail for a year. It was like putting them in a 5-star hotel and feeding them every day. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, because you think of the guards that are required, everything that's required, the institution. So it's not cost effective. It's just what we've always done. But just because we've done it always doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. That's why I was very interested in what BC did, and that in basically asking for decriminalization of drugs, because it made a world of sense to me. It doesn't go after the drug dealers. Drug dealers are still subject to going to prison, but the people who just possess small amounts of drugs, your drug possessors who are spending time in jail and wasting money and resources, they're now getting public health options, and they train the police that way too, to assist in that regard, which again I think should happen here. So.
Yeah, I think we're lucky in BC in a sense that way, that we do have a little bit more progressive culture when it comes to like the mindset towards drug users and that kind of thing than Alberta. We're a little bit
we're a little bit west, and it changes everything. Yeah, so yeah, but it is dramatically different. Like every province I've been in is different, but Alberta is the harshest of all provinces I've been in terms of penalties. So, but that's why it's important to have a good lawyer in your corner, so you don't end up getting convicted, because then all bets are off. So
yeah. And one thing I'm curious about too for you, I know you're based in Red Deer.
No, I'm based in Edmonton, downtown Edmonton. I crowned in Red Deer and then moved. Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, so can people from all over Alberta seek you out for your services, or do you have to? Is it easier, like if they're in Edmonton? Like, I'm just curious if someone's listening to this and they're maybe in like Southern Alberta or Calgary.
Yeah, well, I mean, the only thing that came out of COVID as a positive, the only thing, is that we all started using phones, Zoom, Google Meets, distance. So I represent people everywhere. I represent people in Ontario sometimes. I've represented people in the Northwest Territories. I represent people everywhere, and I'm able to do that because we can have these conversations, and again, it's the quality of the conversation, it's not the format of the conversation. So if you're having a good conversation via Zoom on the computer, no problem, right? So yeah, no, for our services, we're all over Alberta. For anywhere you can think of, any city, town, we will travel to help you out. So yeah,
that's great. And I guess, kind of my last question before we try to some more lighthearted questions are there any like kind of, notable or memorable cases you have that you've maybe like faced with your career that changed your outlook on the justice system in some way? Obviously, we don't need details or anything like that, but was there anything that really impacted you and just,
So, I mean, when I was in Alberta, and I mean, it's public record now because the trial's over, so it's okay to talk about. My client was charged with attempt murder ×2 against the police, pointing a firearm and a number of other offences. Basically, he was drunk home alone, and the police had concerns about his mental health, and they went in with guns out and things. My client got shot in the leg, breaking his femur. He shot. Ultimately, he was acquitted of the attempt murders. However, it did change my view, because obviously you look at the justice system, I look at police, and I look at police positively. They're there to protect you, and this showed me how vulnerable we really are, right? I was thinking with my client, he had been denied bail 3 times until I got on the file. So he was just sitting in jail. First time offender, never been in trouble before. I was able to get him out. But again, that took a lot of doing and a lot of work. And then in terms of the trial, it was a, drag him out trial between myself and the prosecutor. And again, it showed me, if you don't have proper protections in place, like defense lawyers, I mean, a lot of people don't like defense lawyers because, they think they represent all bad people. But in this case, it's not a bad guy. It's a guy who got caught up in a circumstance. Then you need someone to balance against the state, because the state is powerful. You got prosecutors, you got police, you got everybody. And so what do you have? You have a defense lawyer, right? And the defense lawyer is really your last resort. So I think that taught me not to assume things are, hunky-dory, and that's it doesn't take much for you to be that person that police come storming in the door, and what do you do in that circumstance, and how do you defend yourself when people are saying you're an attempt murderer after that? Scary stuff. So that opened up my eyes. And then I had one in Toronto, where I thought the guy was innocent, 100% innocent. He had explained to me, I believe it was a very, very easy case to prove. I got a judge that I very much liked in Toronto, and he was convicted. And that was extremely upsetting for me, because it was the only, it's actually, I remember him. It's a fraud under 5,000, which is a minor charge. And it's the only one I really remember from out of Toronto, because it was the only one where I couldn't believe that he was found guilty, given the facts and the scenario. So that affected me emotionally. And then the other just affected me with some, having some awareness, because as often I drive to a house in downtown Edmonton, police aren't rushing in my door generally. So, but when you're out in the country, God knows what could happen. So that's the issue, right? So it's
an important question to ask, with like, you never really know ultimately it's in the judge's hands, right? Where, you can prepare the best defense possible and the person is innocent, and ultimately it kind of comes down to offense.
Yeah, it's the judge's decision. So in that case with the fraud under, all the facts were brought out that I thought needed to be brought out, but it was just an individual decision. He just didn't believe my client, and because my client testified, and he didn't find my client believable or reliable. And there's nothing I could do about that. That's just how my client presented on the stand, whether he was nervous or for whatever reason. But yeah, no, you're never guaranteed a win. I always tell people in trials, I say you're looking at a 50-50 situation in all circumstances. You can't control a judge, prosecutor, none of it. All we can control is our defense and building our defense. And that gives us our best opportunity. But I don't tell people I have a 98% win streak or 100% win streak, because that's one thing when you asked me before, if you're going to hire a lawyer, do not hire a lawyer who gives you a guarantee of percentages that they can win. Yeah. They cannot guarantee anything. No one can in this system. And if they do that, that's really problematic. And counting wins and losses, again, no one does that. No lawyer worth their salt does that. So if they tell you I'm 114-1, it's a lie. It's a lie. So expect it, right? Yeah. That's why I say go to those reviews and read what clients say about the interaction with those people. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, I guess now we can kind of, transition to some lighter topics. We've gone into of your stuff. So we'll kind of finish it up with like just some rapid fire here so we can get to know a bit more about you personally. So my first question for you is either what is your favorite book or a book that you've read recently that had...
So, yeah, reading for fun dies when you become a lawyer. So when you put this question to me, I was thinking, well, what is it? And when was the last time I read? The last book I read, which had an impact. So I'm big into business and marketing, and obviously that's kind of how I drove my practice forward. It's the Empire State of Mind. It's the story of Jay-Z. Not Jay-Z, his life story, but Jay-Z, how he built the various brands and businesses which have kind of propelled him to be a billionaire. So I'm a little behind him, I'm finding, like in terms of getting there. But at that being said, it was still insightful to see someone come from nothing, build themselves into something. Again, and I admire those stories always, right? And it inspires me with business to push a little harder every day to get this thing growing and moving. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, definitely being in your position, having to learn like the marketing and all these new things that comes with owning a business, having those kind of resources are super, like books, podcasts, whatever is super.
Yeah, I always watch podcasts constantly on leadership, market, any number of things, because they're invaluable. There's people out there who know more than you. That's a fact. So listening to them is helpful. And as I say, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's out there. The information's out there, whether it's in books or podcasts or whatever you can find. Look for it though. Look for it. Yeah.
100%. Okay, the next question is, if you let's say you never went to law school, you can work in any other fields. What would it be? I've gotten some very surprising answers to this question, so I don't know what lawyers say.
I'm not sure what I would do. I was actually headed to an early retirement where I was going to open up a boutique hotel in Costa Rica, and that was my plan. But then I realized it costs a lot, so that plan died. And then the other thing I'm interested in is doing marketing and sales, because what I found in the marketing sales guys I worked with is they're able to be on a beach with a computer doing the same job while I sit on my desk in front of the same damn thing, a computer, not enjoying any weather like that. So, and I find sales and marketing to be fascinating, right? Because it's the growth of your business and how quickly you can grow your business. So, this kind of journey has allowed me to meet many experts and professionals in that area. But again, my computer skills, I think you've seen a little bit of them. They're not that great. So I'd have to sharpen up a bit. So before I did that. So
yeah. Well. No, that's amazing. And there is so much overlap. Every field, whether you know it or not, you're doing some form of marketing and sales. Even just pitching yourself. How you communicate.
100%.
Those principles.
100% correct. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And as I say, it's I think that's kind of lost in the legal profession. Some of the personal injury lawyers are fantastic at it, and then everyone else is lagging.
Yeah,
including myself. But we just don't we just don't put ourselves out there the same way that like a personal injury team does, right? Like Diamond and Diamond, right? Everyone's seen their signs. That's it. But I mean, so that's it. And I watch them too. I watch those firms and try to learn from them as well. Like, so we had a billboard up in downtown, and we had some buses now running with our logos and us outside. Yeah, so we're trying to create a brand. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
That's great. Not enough lawyers and law firms, I think, do understand the importance of a strong brand.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, if you want a legacy that you can walk away from, that's a brand is what you need. So, from my perspective. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing, I actually kind of want to pull it back to something you said earlier in the conversation about how people they have this perception of criminal lawyers as defending the bad guys, so to speak. How can you kind of like push back against that, or what should people know about criminal lawyers that, or like maybe it's about your clients, or that can kind of challenge that concept or that perception of you guys?
Defending the devil. Yeah, no, I worked as a prosecutor, right? And when I was a prosecutor, I believed genuinely some of the people behind me were bad people. Now, did I know those people? No. They were charged with bad things. So many of them were found innocent, and they deserve to be found innocent. And you really don't know. It's not black and white. It's not like good and evil. There's shades of gray because it's people. And so until that first witness opens their mouth, I wouldn't make assumptions. And I always tell people, everyone is critical of a defense lawyer until you need one. So I could say all these bad things about a defense lawyer, get in a little bit of trouble because you never know. And then you need that very person that you think is not the greatest of individuals ethically or morally. But as I say, a lot of my clients are down on their luck and just need some help and some assistance. And I tried using the mechanisms I have to help them. And then there are a lot of people who are, innocent of the crime, and that's a reality. And the thing is, we don't imagine we got rid of defense lawyers, or we kind of gutted that kind of industry. You would see more and more innocent people being wrongfully convicted, and we've seen wrongful convictions all across the country. With weak defense lawyers, and when tunnel vision from the Crown was put on. So, as I say, I think defense lawyers are the protection for citizens against the violation of their rights. If someone's going to violate your rights, whether it be police or a government, any agent of government, it's going to be a defense lawyer, unfortunately for you guys, that fixes that issue. If someone's, exactly, someone searches your car, someone pulls you over, again, that's what a defense lawyer does, is deals with that search, deals with how that is inappropriate because you weren't doing anything wrong, and vindicates you. And that's what a defense lawyer does. So I think, it's shades of gray, no black and white. There are some really bad guys out there, no doubt about it, but it's not the majority. This is not even close to the majority. So that's a great sentiment. And even people that they are guilty. I'm sure there's all these other circumstances. Yeah, it's like circumstances, right? Like, it's very easy to sit back and judge. Well, this person did this. They're horrible for that. But then you look and they've lived a tragic life. They had a horrible childhood. They were treated terribly by parents, etc. So again, it's you have to sit in on an entire trial to fully understand the individual, and then kind of what that defense lawyer is doing, right, for that individual. And you're right. So a lot of it ends in guilty pleas. I think 90% ends in just people pleading guilty and then having their circumstances properly laid out for the court because they couldn't do it themselves. Because it would be a nightmare if people were individually setting up their personal circumstance. I can't even imagine how long court would go. 9, 10 at night or something like that, right? So, yeah.
Well, great. Well, go ahead and we'd love to know, feel free to give a little plug for MD Law. Where can we find you guys? What's the best way to get a hold of you? MD Law, we're located in the Sunleaf Place building, downtown Edmonton on the 8th floor. We have units 820 and 840. We're also on YouTube. You just have to look up my name, and there'll be a number of videos which give you kind of information on anything from criminal offenses to the latest news. I just did a YouTube video on the BC issue today. We have that. We have TikTok as well, which has less value from my perspective, but it's there. And then Facebook, you can find us there. But if you want to get a hold of us, you can just give me an email anytime. I'll get it on to the right team member, and that's just Dan, DAN,
M as in Michael, D as in Daniel, lawgroup.ca, and I'll get back to you right away. So as soon as you get to me, I'll get back to you.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Legal Connect podcast. We hope you found our conversation informative and helpful in navigating the process of hiring and working with a lawyer. Make the process of hiring a lawyer easier than ever and ensure the best match possible through our platform at lawchick.com. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.